Is the blessing of my colleagues.
How can they refuse a judge informing himself about a case?
I think it's about 5 textbooks or so. Madam.
5?
How many? 5 textbooks.
Yeah, fine, no problem. Yeah, so the witness in.
Your name is Senator?
My name is Johannes Steenekamp.
Do you have any objection in taking the oath?
I do not.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing else but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
The witness is sworn in.
English or Afrikaans, Dr. Steenkamp?
I beg your pardon?
Wel, u getuige Afrikaans
No,
of Engels?
I'll do it in English.
Yes, want die hof is tweetalig en is ook mattig in Afrikaans.
Ek hoor sê.
Dank u. Okay, you can go on.
The court pleases, my lord, this witness is going to testify in respect of Exhibit L. Yes, Exhibit L forms part of the admissions.
The admissions?
Yes.
Okay. Is this the,
As per Exhibit F, the witness is also going to refer to Exhibit D, the photo album of Lieutenant Colonel Mhlahlo regarding the post-mortem photos.
Okay.
Yes. Dr. Steenekamp, just want to show you a document which has been marked Exhibit L. Is that your affidavit?
That is correct.
Exhibit L, ngempela ke kuyiyona affidavit yami. Can you just read the contents of Exhibit L in the record? Firstly, just identify the document.
This is death register number 2076 of 2015. That's the GW7/15 form. And it's a report on a medical legal post-mortem examination. And then starting off with affidavit in terms of section 212.418 of Act 51 of 1977.
Just a minute to give the...
Umbiko ke lona noma iregister ke mayelana nokushona in a number 2076-2014 GW715 postmortem yona ke eyenzelwa khona ke eGermiston kanye futhi ke affidavit yenziwa phansi kwakhe ke section 212. Yes.
I, Dr. Johannes Steenekamp, qualifications MB, CHB, F4 Path, close brackets, attached to section Forensic Pathology Service Germiston, private bag X1221 Germiston, declare under oath in English as follows.
You can read the whole paragraph.
I am in the employ of the Gauteng Provincial Government as a principal specialist forensic pathology in Germiston.
Just a minute.
No, you can read.
Yes. Doctor, when did you acquire your first qualification?
My lord, the first qualification was the MBCHB. That's in 1976, here in the University of Pretoria.
Ezoqala ke ifundo engayiphothula ke ekuyona MBCH kwakungo 1976 khona ke la ku University of Pretoria.
And after acquiring your qualification, what was your career path like?
After I qualified, I was appointed to the district surgeon since 1979.
Emuva kokuthi ngayiphothula ke ifundo ngase ngisebenza kuyona ke i-district noma ngaya kuyona ke is-district surgeon ukusukela ngaye 1979.
Where, doctor? Where?
That was in Johannesburg.
Johannesburg.
And the department?
Of Health, Department of Health.
Kuyona ke i-department ika-health.
In 1983, I started specializing in forensic pathology.
Ngase ngiqala ke ngaye 1983 ukuthi ke ngispecialize ke kuyona i-forensic pathology.
and I achieved the qualification, the F4 path, in 1988. F4 path,
Ngase ngenza yona-ke i-F for PEP, you said 1980?
sorry, 1987.
1987.
And what does that stand for, Doctor, just for
And that's
record
a
purpose?
fellowship in forensic pathology. This is an exam that I do through the colleges of medicine of South Africa.
Lokhu kwenziwa ngawo ama-college azo-ke ezempilo noma awe-medicine e-South Africa, yona-ke i-F for PEP.
Okay.
Yes.
I am in the employ of the, on the 20,
Just before you proceed, Doctor, and from that period, when you qualified as a forensic pathology specialist, more or less, how many postmortems did you carry out per year?
it's usually about 500 autopsies per year, my lord.
Kuvamise ukuthi-ke kusukela ngaso sikhathi-ke ngaphothela ifundo ukuthi-ke ama-autopsy engiwenzayo-ke noma-ke kuhlinzwa kwayo imizimba abe u-500.
Yes. Are you still in the service of the Department of Health?
I have retired in 2016, my lord.
Ngase ngishiya-ke umsebenzi-ke noma ngaretire ngo-2016.
Is it correct that you were a principal specialist?
That is correct.
Kuyiqiniso-ke ukuthi inhloko-ke noma-ke i-principal specialist.
Now, in that capacity, did you conduct any training?
We usually did training as part of our service delivery, and that's since 1983, where we taught students at the Wits University, also training like paramedics, police, law students, etc.
Ukusuka ngayo-ke u-1983 sibaqeqeshile-ke abaningi sibaqeqeshela khona-ke e-vets, ama-students, ama-paramedics, amaphoyisa.
And testifying in court, have you testified in court?
I have.
Nginikeziwe-ke futhi nangobufakazi ey'nkantolo.
Yes, which forums, which courts?
Usually
District courts, regional court, high courts?
High Court, District Court, regional courts, all of them, inquest courts.
Zonke-ke iy'nkantolo nje akekho inkantolo la benganikezi khona-ke ngobufakazi eyesifunda, e-regional court, ema-high courts nginikezile nje ngobufakazi.
Yes, thank you. You can proceed then with your affidavit.
On 28/10/2014, a body bearing the number 2076/2014 was pointed out and identified to me by Forensic Pathology Officer E. McQuena of the Germiston Mortuary.
Just a minute. Is there a relevant photo that you can point out?
Yes, there's a
that indicate this
photograph indicating the number, the toe tag on photo 148.
Sikhona-ke isithombe noma aqale lana-ke futhi ngo-28 zika-October 2014 kunemzimba-ke noma isidumbu-ke esinenamba ewu-2076/2014 engasikhonjiswa-ke uyena oyi-forensic pathology officer u-E. McQuena owasemakhazini eGermiston. Kunasikhona-ke isithombe esitshengisa leyo number-ke isithombe u-148.
Mr. Court, please, my lord, we have requested that the photos of the post-mortem not be shown
Yes.
for the reasons that were canvassed when we were debating these aspects.
Ngishoshiso ichazela-ke inkantolo ukuthi isicelo besenziwe-ke ukuthi iy'thombe lezi ze-postmortem zingakhonjiswa khona laphayana.
You mean they won't be beamed from
Yes,
the,
on the screen.
that on the screen?
Yes,
Yeah.
but my colleagues have got copies of the
Yes.
post-mortem photos.
Kodwa abameli benu babanawo-ke amakhophi alezi y'thombe.
Yes, you may proceed, Doctor.
I conducted a post-mortem examination on the said body and recorded my findings on attached form G77/15 which facts I ascertained through an examination which required skill in biology, anatomy and pathology.
Ngase ngenza ke yona ke i-postmortem noma ukuhlola ke kuloyo mzimba loyo ngase lokho engakuthola ke ngabhala phansi ke kwi-form eku-GW7 15 nokuthi futhi ke lokho ke ngakwenza ke ngokuthi noma lokho kudinga ukuthi ukwenzeke uma ke une-skill ke kuyona i-biology, anatomy kanye futhi nayo i-pathology.
Yes, you can proceed to page 2, Doctor, Roman figure 1. Then thereafter proceed to Roman figure 3.
To the Magistrate of Boksburg, I, Johannes Steenekamp, hereby certify that 1. I examined the body of an adult black male on 28/10/2014 at the Germiston mortuary beginning at 8 o'clock.
Mina ke lana ke noma lena ke iya kuyena ke uMagistrate waseBoksburg ukuthi mina uJohannes Steenekamp ngiyasho ke ukuthi ngase ngihlola ke umzimba ke wakhe umuntu wesilisa umuntu omnyama nge-28 zika October 2014 kona ke amakhaza ase-Germiston ngaqala ngo-8.
Yes, you've already placed the contents of paragraph 2 on record. You can proceed to Roman figure 3.
The death occurred as informed on 26/10/2014.
Yes, feel it.
The chief post-mortem findings in this case were attached schedule of observations.
Isitumbuke noma ke ukufa lokhu ngendlela ke engatshelwa ngayo kwenzeka ke noma ukushona kwakhe kwaba nge-26 zika October 2014 futhi ke okona ke okwatholakala ukuthi kwakuyini imbangela ikhona ke kukhona ke iphepha ke elishoyo noma imininingwane echazayo lokho ihamba nawo lo mbiko.
You can proceed to page 3, Doctor.
That is the schedule of observations. Under general, 1, Roman 1, height 1.77 meter, mass 80 kilogram, which I estimated, physique average, nutrition normal.
Lana ke uma nje ngendlela engambheka ngayo noma ngambona ngayo ukuthi ke ubude bakhe ke kwaku 1.77 meters is noma ke ubunzima bakhe ke ku 80 kg lokho ngakuqagela nokuthi ke wayekangakanani ke emaphakathi nje nendawo ukondleka kwakhe ke kujwayelekile.
Roman 2, special identifying features, an adult male wearing a blood-stained T-shirt, a blood-stained vest, blue tracksuit pants, and white and blue underpants.
Lokho ke engingamchaza ngako ke ukuthi kwakuumuntu wesilisa omnyama ke owayefake i-t-shirt noma iskipa esimhlophe esasinegazi, i-vest emhlophe eyayinegazi, i-tracksuit elaliblue ngombala kanye futhi ke nama underwear e-white na blue.
Are there relevant photos in this regard, Doctor?
They are on photo 144,
Ithombe ke ehambisana naloko engikushoyo isithombe u144,
146,
u146,
147,
147,
148,
148,
149,
149,
and 150 to 154.
usuka ke kuyena 150 ukuyosho ke ku154.
Can I continue?
Yes.
Bullet 1, the blue trousers are contained with blood-stained fluid. Are stained with blood-stained fluid over the back. There is also a small 0.5 centimeter hole over the central aspect of the pants, just below the waistband. This does not correspond to any skin wound.
Ibhluka ke awayifakile ke eliblue lona ke lali naloke igazi la ngasemuva kukhona futhi ke nembotshana encane u0.5 centimeters ngaphezulu njena ke kwibhuluko lelo kodwa la ngasezantsi nje ngasemazantsi kodwa lokho ke akuhambelani ke noma ke akukhulumisani ke naliphi inxeba elikhona noma ukulimala okukhona emzimbeni.
Bullet 2, the underpants are blood-stained over the back.
Kwakunegazi ke kulona ibhuluko lakhe ngasemuva.
Bullet 3, the white blood-stained T-shirt shows a 4 centimeter by 3 centimeter star-shaped hole over the central anterior chest region. That's over the front of the chest,
Yes.
corresponding to wound 2 in paragraph 4.
Bese kuthi ke iskipa ke lesi awayesigqokile ke esimhlophe esasinegazi sikhombisa ke noma sitshengisa ke imbobo ke e4 cm by 3 cm uhlobo ke lestar ngaphezulu la ngaphambili esubeni kodwa nje lana ke ngaphezulu futhi lolo ke lihambisana ke kanye nenxeba noma ke ukulimala kwesibili okukhona ku paragraph 4.
These are best seen in photograph 152 and 153.
Kuyizithombe ke u152 kanye no153 kukhona ke noma kuyabonakala lokho.
It also shows a 1 centimeter hole over the back corresponding to wound 3. That's also in paragraph 4.
Bese ikhombisa ke imbobo ke u1 cm ngasemuva yona ke ihambisana ke noma ke ikhulumisana naye nalo ke inxeba lesithathu nalokho ke ukuthola kuyena uparagraph 4.
The underlying vest, bullet 4, the underlying vest is blood-stained, showing a 3 centimeter by 2 centimeter rounded hole over the anterior chest region and a 1 centimeter defect over the posterior region. That's over the front and the back of the T-shirt.
Bese
Vest.
kuthi ke ivest le eyayigqoke ngaphansi ke eyayinegazi yona ke ikhombisa ke imbobo ke ewu3 cm by 2 cm la ngaphambili ke esifubeni kanye futhi nangasemuva.
Doctor, can you just explain the term defect? What does that mean?
It's a hole. It's basically a hole.
Ukhuluma ke ukuthi kwakuyimbobo ke leyo.
Yes, and the relevant photos?
I think they are on 160 and 161. It's not very clear there.
Ithombe ke u160 no161 noma ke kungaqamile lapho.
Okay, doctor, just look at photos 146 and 152 as well.
146 shows it,
Yabonakala ku146
as well as 152.
kanye naye ke u152.
Yes, you may proceed.
Then in brackets, the clothing were not required for any special investigation. Was after discussion with the investigating officer and ballistic team present at the autopsy, close brackets.
Impahla noma ingubo ke awayigqokile kwakungekho sidingo ke noma sasingekho ke isidingo sokuthi ithathwe ke sithathele bona ke kona ukuphenya emuva kokukhulumisana ke kanye na nomphenyi nalabo abaphenyayo kanye futhi ke nalabo abasebenza ngeibhamu noma laba abama ballistic ababe khona lapho nkathi ngenza lo msebenzi.
Paragraph 3, Roman 3, secondary post-mortem changes. The body had been refrigerated and is well preserved.
Umzimba lona ke wafakwa kumakhazeni futhi ke wawugcineke kahle.
And then I continue to paragraph Roman 4, external appearance of the body and condition of the limbs. Then number 1, 154.1, which is visible on photo 154, and 159.
Kulezi ithombe ke u154 no159 kuloku ke engizokhuluma ngako ukuthi umzimba wawubukeka kanjani ke.
And I describe these as there are ECG stickers, that's electrocardiograph stickers, situated over the left anterior and right anterior chest walls. So that's the front of the chest. Over the left clavicle, that's the left collarbone, and over the right anterior shoulder line. That's the line extending from the shoulder downwards.
Nokuthi ke kwakunama sticker ke engabiza ngokuthi ke ama ECG ama sticker akhona ke ayelana kuhlangothi la ngasekudla kanye nalolo longasekunxeleke khona la esifubeni kanye futhi ke nalana ke kwi ehlombe kwihlangothi ke la ngase left kanye ke futhi nangase right la kulona ke ihlombe.
This indicates that there had been some resuscitative measures performed with an electrocardiograph being performed to check the condition of the heart.
Lokho kusho ke noma kuchaza ke ukuthi ke kukhona ke okwenziwa noma okwakuzanywa ke ukuthi ke bagcinwe ke ephilileke noma ephila.
And Doctor, where would the electrocardiograph stickers normally be used? In which setting?
That is usually during resuscitation.
Lama sticker ke asetshenziswa uma ke uzama ukuthi umuntu umgcineke esaphila ke. Yes.
Or for diagnostic procedure.
Noma ke uma kwenza lokho kubizwa ukuthi ukudiagnose.
Yes.
Then paragraph 4, number 2, and that is the important wound, and it is visible on photos 154 right through to 159.
Kule ithombe ke u154 kuyofica kuyena ke u159 lokulimala ke kubonakala kuona kulezo zithombe.
And I described it as situated over the right anterior chest wall, that's the right front of the chest.
Ngichaza ke ukuthi kulohlangothi la ngaphambili ke esifubeni kuhlangothi la ngakwesokudla.
1 centimeter to the right of the midline and 135 centimeter above the heel is a 3 centimeter by 1.5 centimeter oval-shaped lacerated wound. It's a torn, oval-shaped wound.
Lana ke kwakuyinqaba ke leli lalidabukile ke kodwa ke ngeshape yakhona ke shape oval. Futhi lona ke uma elichaza lu1 cm kuhlangothi lo ngase right kanye futhi ke no 135 cm ngaphezulu nje kwaloko kubizwa ngokuthi iheel futhi ke lu 3 cm by 1.5 cm.
And then there is a semicircular abrasion situated over the superior and inferior aspects. That's now the wound that I mentioned, measuring 0.3, the upper part, and 0.5 centimeters below the lower one.
Linguyena ke umkhuzuka ke ukuthi lalu 0.3 ngaphezulu ke kanye futhi libe u0.5 cm ke ngezansi.
Doctor, can you describe abrasion?
Abrasion is a damage to the superficial layer of the skin. In this case, I thought it was due to the muzzle of the firearm that had been used.
Lana ke uma sithetha nge-abrasion noma sikhuluma nge-abrasion sikhuluma ngawo ke umkhuzuke ke iskin somuntu ngicabanga ukuthi lokho ke kwenziwa ke ilokho kubizwa ngokuthi i-muzzle yaso isibhamu.
The wound edges appear seared. That's a heat effect. That's burning.
Okay, that's it.
Situated just below the skin, blackened granular material consistent with gunshot residue are noted in the underlying soft tissue. So when I opened this wound and explored it, I noted this black granular material.
ngathi uma ke lenqeba ke noma lokulimala lokhu sengikuvula ke ngase ngibona lokhu ke okumnyama okubuza ukuthi igranular ke uma echaza lana ukuthi lokho kuhambisana ke nayo ke i-residue noma ke impuphu ke eyesperm.
And then in brackets, I came to a conclusion following the examination of this wound. I said this wound is consistent with a contact bullet entrance wound.
Ngase ke mase ngikuphetha ke lokho ngafinyelela ke ukuthi inxeba noma ukulimala lokho ke ukulimala ke okungabangelwa ke noma okuhambisana ke nokungena kwenhlamvu.
And I say that due to the fact that when a muzzle is pressed against the skin, all the elements, that's the gas, the heat, the gunpowder, are driven into the skin.
Lokho ngikusho ke uma ke isibhamu lesi ke sicindezelwe noma sibekiwe ke kwiskin somuntu konke ke lokho kuhambisana nawo igas ipowder yakhona ke ukuthi konke lokho kuse kuphumela ke kusona iskin noma kuhlala kusona iskin somuntu.
So with a muzzle firmly against the skin, especially the gas will go below the skin and explode backwards towards the outside.
Uma ke isibhamu lesi ke sesicindezelwe ke kuyena ke umuntu noma kwiskin somuntu ke ikakhulukazi ke igas ukuthi izongena ke ibese futhi ke iyaphuma ke,
resulting in this original big lacerated wound as I have described.
bese ke lokho ke kubangela ke lenxeba leli engikhulume ngalo ke elikhulu ke.
Doctor, when you say the gases explode backwards to the outside, what do you mean?
Away from the skin towards the muzzle or towards the firearm.
Engikushoyo ke ukuthi le gas engikhuluma ngayo ke uma istatshile ke iskin yasiphinde yabuyela futhi ibuyela kuyona ke kusona isibhamu noma ke imuzzle leyo yesibhamu.
And the gunshot residue, what will that have resulted from?
That's from a firearm, the residue that was ignited.
Uma ngikhuluma ngayo ke i-gunshot residue noma ke yona ke impuphu iphuma kusona ke isibhamu uma ngabe sesiqhuma.
In the relevant photos, Doctor?
That is 154 to 159.
Iy'thombe ke ey'hambisana noma ey'tshengisa khona ke lokho u-154 kuyofika kuyena ke u-159.
Yes, you may proceed.
Then I've got a heading, wound track. The track of this wound passes downwards, backwards, from front to back, downwards, and laterally away from the midline of the body.
Manje ke indlela ke ngokulimala noma lenxeba okuhambe ngayo ukuthi ke lindlula ke liye phansi bese liya ngasemuva ke bese lidlula ke kuona ke uline lona ke womzimba noma la emzimbeni.
Doctor, if we can ask you just to demonstrate that.
Over the front of the chest,
Ngena la
right,
ngaphambili ke kuhlangothi lase right
over the breastbone,
lidlule ke kwithanjo ithambo
One
leli yebo sorry
1 centimeter to the right of the midline, over the breastbone, around the level of rib 3.
lana ke ku 1 centimeter futhi ke kuyona ke i-level yakhe u-rib 3.
Yes, and the wound passing downwards, backwards, and laterally. If you
Yes.
can maybe just demonstrate that just quickly.
It goes down. I think
Yes.
there is a photograph.
Ngicabanga ukuthi sikhona ke isithombe.
Yes, we will get to that. If you can maybe just quickly just show
On my
your
body. Oh,
yes.
okay. I've got my pen here indicating the firearm, and it would be roughly in a direction like this.
Lizongena kanjena ke ngalendlela akhombisa ngayo.
Yes.
From front to back
Ngaphambili ukuya ngasemuva.
and away from the midline of the body.
Bese lingathi liyahamba ke liyasuka ke kuloko kubizwa ngokuthi i-midline yomzimba.
Yes.
Sorry, from my understanding, what is the angle, as you say, goes down? The angle,
It's an acute angle.
it's an acute angle.
I-angle ebizwa ngokuthi ke asiyona ke engqo noma ke i-acute.
Along the wound track. Then first bullet, it perforates the sternum On the right, at the level of rib 3, the sternum is the breastbone at the level of rib 3.
And perforate, so can you just explain the term perforate?
It passes through. It makes a hole through it.
Ibisingena-ke lana noma ingena-ke kuyona-ke noma-ke ithambo layo-ke i-rib lena bese ngishilo-ke ukuthi u-rib 3.
Showing blackening of the outer aspect, and that's still consistent with the bullet contact wound, the gunshot residue.
Lokhu kusahambelana nako-ke noma-ke ukungena kwayo-ke inhlamvu ngoba lana ibonakalisa noma iveza-ke indawo-ke ejika noma ibe mnyama.
And then it also shows, as well as inverted bone fragments over the inner aspect of this bone. So little fragments of bone are driven inside the body, and this confirms a contact entrance, not a contact, entrance wound.
Lamathambo-ke abe esengena-ke lana-ke ongathi wona-ke asenako-ke ukuphuka-ke manje abe esengena ngaphakathi-ke loko okuyinkomba-ke impela yayo inhlamvu eyangena noma ukushaywa inhlamvu.
This perforation, or the perforation, measures 1 centimeter in diameter, enlarging towards the inner aspect of the sternum where inverted bone fragments are noted.
Bese kuthi lokungena kwayo-ke inhlamvu uma kukalwa-ke noma kumetwa-ke kutholakala u1 centimeter kuyona-ke oya ngaphakathi-ke emzimbeni kusona-ke isternum noma lokhu okubizwa ngokuthi-ke ithambo layo i-rib la ekwatholakala khona-ke futhi ukuphuka kwawo amathambo.
It's not clear, but it's around photo number 173.
Kusona-ke isithombe u173 akucacileke kodwa isona isithombe okungabonakala kusona.
And then the next bullet, it lacerates the pericardial sac, that's the heart sac, leaving a 2 by 1 centimeter irregular laceration.
Simplify that. Can you just simplify this?
Yes, and what is an irregular laceration?
Where there?
It lacerates. Can you just simplify?
It tears.
Okay.
Laceration is a torn wound.
Yaseke idabula-ke khona-ke la ngaphakathi kuyona-ke inhliziyo yashiya khona-ke ukudabuka-ke oku2 centimeter by 1 centimeter.
Black granular material, as well as small fragments of bone, are noted surrounding this defect in the anterior mediastinum. The anterior mediastinum is the front part where the heart is located.
Lana-ke ila ngaphambili-ke la inhliziyo ingakhona. You say, what did it do there? Where are you?
Mediastinum.
Okay, yes. What did it do there?
No, that's just the black granular.
Okay. Iloku okumnyama-ke okwasala-ke ngasemuva kokuthi ingenile.
And the relevant photos?
It's 176. And 177.
Ithombe-ke eyikhulumisana nalokho u176 kanye naye u177.
And one can see the heart sac just pushed up. It's not very clear on those photos.
Nenhliziyo-ke lena-ke ekhuphukile-ke kodwa-ke akugqamile kulezo ithombe lezo.
And this finding in this bullet, is it indicative of anything?
The black granular material,
Yes.
it's indicative of a contact bullet wound. It's still the gunpowder that's driven into this wound.
Lokhu-ke ukusho-ke ukushaywa yona-ke inhlamvu kanye futhi-ke nayo ipowder lena yesibhamu eyangena ngaphakathi.
And then the next bullet, it lacerates the heart, resulting a 3 centimeter by 1 centimeter irregular laceration, that's a tear, extending from the anterior wall, that's the front wall of the right ventricle, that's the right chamber of the heart that pushes the blood towards the lungs.
Just a moment. Kwasokutholakala ukuthi-ke yase idabula yona-ke inhliziyo lokho okwaholela-ke kulo kudabuka ke oku 3 cm by 1 cm ukusuka ke la ngaphambili ke noma kulo hlangothi olungaphambili lwaso isifuba. Yes.
We're still with this wound, partially lacerating the right coronary artery. That's the artery that supplies the heart with muscles. You get two, one on the left, one on the right, and this is the right coronary artery.
Yase idabula ke la khona ke ekunikeza khona ke noma ekuphampa khona ke kwinhliziyo ama muscle uthola eyanga ku left neyase right ilena ke yadabula eya ku right.
And this laceration that I'm talking about also extends into the right atrium. That's the antechamber to the right ventricle.
Yase idabula nayo ke lona ke artery eya ngaku right.
Blood from the body accumulates in the right atrium and goes to the heart, right side of the heart where it's pumped to the lungs.
Bese kuthi ke ukuhamba kwegazi ke noma igazi ke emzimbeni usebenza kulona ke uhlangothi lwangako right bese uyakhona ke emzimbeni noma kuyona inhliziyo.
And then I'm still doing the wound track. It then bruises the upper lobe of the right lung, bruises or contusing.
Bese futhi ke idabula ke noma ke ihuzula ke la ngaphezulu ke noma lokho okubuza ukuthi yilobe yaso isiphunga sangaku right.
What is an upper lobe,
Upper
doctor?
lobe, the right lung is consisting of 3 lobes, upper, a middle and a lower lobe, and I'm talking about the upper part.
Lana ke uzothola ke ukuthi ke isiphunga ke lesi sinama lena ke engaphansi engiphakathi nendawo nephezulu lana sikhuluma ngalena ke engaphezulu ilobe.
And then it also perforates the lower lobe of the right lung, leaving a 5 centimeter by 3 centimeter irregular perforating hemorrhagic lacerated wound.
Bese kuthi ke ingena ke kulobe ke lena engasezantsi yaso isiphunga sangaku right ibisishiya ke u5 cm by 3 cm ongena noma ke okhoza ke ukopha noma ke ukuphuma kwegazi kulona ke inxeba lelo elidabukile.
And just explain hemorrhaging in simple terms, doctor.
That's bleeding into the soft tissues of the lung.
Hemorrhage ke ukopha ke kuona ke ama soft tissue aso isiphunga.
And then the second last bullet, it perforates the 9th intercostal space on the right posteriorly. That's at the right of the back, inside of the chest, at the back, leaving a 2 centimeter by 1 centimeter hemorrhagic perforating lacerated wound, noted in photos 182 and 183.
Can you just explain that part?
Which one?
The one you just read.
The 9th intercostal space is the space between the 2 ribs situated on the right.
Lana ke uma ekhuluma ke ngayo ke in 9th space okhuluma ke ngama ribs amabili ke ahlukile. Yes. Angaku right.
Okay.
Ukuthi yase ingena ke leyo nhlamvu lapho ke kuleso space leso yashiya ke lo 2 cm by 1 cm la ekwakunokopha noma ukuphuma kwegazi khona ke eyangena khona yase ishiya ke la lokwakulimala la eyadabula khona.
Continuing with the wound track, it is then joined to wound number 3.
Yase ke ihlanganiswa ke noma kwase kuhlanganiswa ke nayo ke naye ke wound 3.
Which
Just
is,
explain, sorry, when you mean wound number 3.
that is paragraph 4, number 3.
Sikhuluma ngaye ke uparagraph 4 number 3.
Which is an external wound over the back.
Okuyinqaba ke elila ngasemuva ke.
And I described this wound. And let me show you the picture. Would be, I think, 162, the best picture.
Esona ke sithombe ongasibona ke u162.
And I described it as a 1,3 by 0,7 oval-shaped lacerated wound, again torn edges, situated over the right posterior chest. That's the back of the chest.
Then uma ngichaza ke ngichaza-ke nanjengo-1.3 cm by 0.7 cm elila ngasemuva-ke elidabukile kuhlangothi la ngaku-right.
4.5 centimeter to the right of the midline and 1 to 6 centimeter above the heel.
Bese kuthi liba-ke u-4.5 cm kuhlangothi-ke la ngaku-right noma lokwesokudla-ke kanye futhi no-1 to 6 cm ngaphezu nje kwalokho achaza nanjenge-heel.
And then there's a diagram where I indicated the wounds, wound 1 and 2, the entrance and the exit wound, as well as the wound track.
Ikhona-ke ne-diagram noma-ke umdwebo-ke la engitshengisa khona-ke amanqaba lawo la inhlamvu yangena khona nala futhi-ke eyaphuma khona ukuhamba nje kwayo.
And just, Doctor, if you can just maybe in terms of the entrance wound, if you say wound 2, can you just maybe for record purposes, what do you mean?
Wound 2 is paragraph 4, number 2. Paragraph 4, paragraph Roman 4, 2.
Wound 2 yena-ke paragraph 4, 2.
And wound 3?
That will also be paragraph 4, number 3.
Bese kuthi u-3-ke yena-ke paragraph 4, number 3.
Then wound 2 to 3? Which paragraphs will you be referring to?
It's still Roman 4, paragraph 4.
Ngisakhuluma ngaye-ke paragraph 4
and 2
kanye no-2
and 3 under paragraph 4.
kanye no-3 ngaphansi kwakhe-ke paragraph 4 uma sengikhuluma-ke ngaloku kulimala.
Yes, you may proceed, Doctor.
Then I go to this systematic examination. Head and neck, Roman 5. Scalp, no scalp contusions, that's bruises, are noted. The skull is intact.
Uma sesiya-ke noma indlela nje-ke engambheka noma ngambuka ngayo-ke ekhanda-ke futhi-ke nentamo-ke noma-ke iscalp akukho-ke ukulimala kwabonakala-ke khona lapho kanye futhi neskull naso-ke sasise ngendlela.
Roman 6. Intracranial contents, the brain, membranes surrounding the brain, and blood vessels show no pathological changes, and the brain mass is 1490.
Bese kuthi-ke lana-ke noma-ke i-brain lena-ke kanye futhi naloko-ke okungaphakathi kuyona-ke akuzange kutholakala noma kubonakale-ke ukuthi kwakukhona-ke ushintsho olalukhona kanye futhi-ke isisindo-ke noma i-mass yayo-ke ingqondo noma i-brain yakhona kwaku-1490 gram.
Then Roman 7, orbital, nasal and oral cavities, that's the eyes, nose and ears, those cavities are intact.
Ukuthi indlebe amehlo amakhala kwakusengendlela kusahlangene.
Roman 8, mouth, tongue and pharynx, no pathological changes, that's the mouth, tongue and throat.
Ukuthi-ke umlomo-ke ulimi-ke kanye futhi-ke nalana-ke emqaleni nala khona-ke kwakungekho ukushintsha.
Number 9, Roman 9, neck structures, hyoid bone and laryngeal cartilages, those are the small bones here in the throat area, are intact.
Lamathambo-ke amancane akhona-ke lana emqaleni nawo-ke ayesahlangene.
Larynx is the part behind that, below the two.
Nalana-ke i-larynx lena-ke engasemuva-ke kulo enzansi ezimbili engiqeda uzisho.
Thyroid gland, that's the gland in the neck.
Kanye nama-thyroid glands lana-ke ala entanyeni.
The blood vessels are intact.
Kanye futhi-ke nama-vessels alo igazi kwakusahlangene.
Soft tissues of the neck, no hemorrhages are present.
Kanye-ke nalana-ke kuloko kubiza ngokuthi-ke ama-tissue athambileke noma asoft la entanyeni kwakungekho ukopha noma ukuphuma kwegazi okwatholakala lapho.
Then Roman 10, thoracic cage and diaphragm. The right chest cavity contains 1,700 milliliter of free and clotted blood, and that's with reference to the injuries to the heart and the wound track.
Bese kuthi-ke ukutholakala noma ukubhekeka kwawo ke umzimba isifuba ke kuhlangothi la ngaku right kwatholakala ke u1700 mm wala ukuhlangene noma kuhlezi ndawonye noma lokho kubizwa ukuthi iclot ke yalo igazi lokho khuluma ngako ke ukulimala lokho awakuthola.
Number 11.
Just before we proceed, Doctor, the fact that the chest cavity contained 1,700 milliliters of blood, what is that indicative of?
That's blood loss, internal blood loss from the heart as well as the lung in that area that resulted in this blood flowing into the chest cavity, resulting in the left lung collapsing.
Lokhu ke kuyimbangela ke yegazi ke noma ukopha kwakhe ke owaphela ngaphakathi ke lelo gazi labe seliyo limaza ke isiphunga ke sangaku left ukuthi kwakulela gazi laliningi lalingaphakathi kuyena eli 1700 milliliters.
In simple layman's terms, what does that mean? The internal blood loss, what does that mean?
The person is bleeding into a body cavity, like into the chest cavity. He's bleeding from a source, in this case the heart and the lung, and this blood is flowing into the chest cavity.
Ukuthi lo muntu ke igazi ke kuphuma igazi ke kodwa lelo gazi ke eliphumayo ke akulona liphuma kuyona inhliziyo kanye nesiphunga ke kodwa aliphumeli ngaphandle ke kodwa ke liphumela kuloko okubizwa ngokuthi i-chest cavity.
And when we say blood loss, that's technically speaking outside the body because it's not in the blood vessels where it should be. So the
sikhuluma ke ngaphandle ke komzimba ngoba akukho kuma blood vessels la ekufanele ukuthi likhona.
So although it's inside the body, it's not inside the blood vessels, and that is possibly the mechanism or how this person died.
No manjena ke kungaphakathi ke noma uphela ngaphakathi ke emzimbeni kodwa ke akusikona la ekufanele ukuthi ukhona ke mhlambe ke yilokho ke okwaba imbangela ke yokuthi aze abe lo muntu uyashona.
Yes, may proceed.
The mediastinum and esophagus, that's the gullet, and the front part, that's the area below the breastbone.
Lana ke sikhuluma ke la ngezansi njena ke kwethambo leli ke lala esifubeni.
And these were normal.
Lokho ke kwakusehlangene kwangena ushintsho lwakhona lapho.
Roman 12, trachea and bronchi. The trachea and bronchi contain a small amount of blood-stained fluid. Trachea, the windpipe, and the small airways contain a small amount of blood-stained fluid.
Abo pipe ke lana ke bala ngaphambili ke noma bomzimba ke kwakhona nje igazi elincane elalikhona lapho.
Probably due to the injury of the left lung.
Ngoba lokho
Injury of the right lung.
Lokho kungabangelwa ke ukulimala kwesiphunga ke lesi sangaku right.
And the fact that the trachea and bronchi contain a small amount of blood-stained fluid, is this indicative of anything?
It's possible that the person could still have breathed, moving this blood-stained fluid upwards into the airways.
Ukuthi ke kwakunalelo gazi ke lalikhona ke noma ifluid leyo ke eyayinegazi ukuthi wayesaphefumula ke ukuthi lokho bese ke kuyakhuphuka ke kubangela ukuthi lelo gazi libe noma aphefumulele phezulu ngalo.
Then Roman 13, pleurae and lungs, that's the covering of the heart and the lungs. The right lung is pale and partially collapsed. That's due to the injury.
Lana ke masikhuluma ngalo ke iphunga ke noma lokho okombesa kona ke inhliziyo kanye nephunga ke kwatholakala ke ukuthi isiphunga ke sangaku right ukuthi nje usushintshile ke umbala kwaye futhi ke collapsile lokho kungabangelwa ke ukona ke ukulimala.
And the left lung is congested on section. The blood vessels there are still a bit full of blood.
Nokuthi ke ama vessels ke kusona ke isiphunga sangaku left ukuthi ke ayesa wele igazi noma kwakunegazi eliningi.
And Doctor, the fact that the right lung was pale, is that indicative of anything?
Well, the lung was injured, so it's blood loss basically.
Lana ke ukuthi ke ilung noma ke isiphunga ke lesangaku right ukuthi sasishintshe nombala ke lokho khuluma ngokuthi nje ukuthi kwase igazi ke leli elaliselincane.
The mass of the right lung was 300 and the mass of the left lung was 510 grams.
Uma usukala ke amalang lana omabili ke elaku right kwaku 300 gram bese kuthi la ku left kube 510 gram.
Then the heart and the pericardium, also see paragraph 4 for the injuries.
Bese kuthi ke inhliziyo ke kanye nayo ke pericardium ukuthi ke bheka ke kuyena ke uparagraph 4 la ikutshela khona ke ngokulimala.
The pericardial sac contains less than 50 milliliter of blood. Apart from the injuries mentioned, the rest of the heart was normal.
Bese kuthi yona ke isikhoma ke lesi noma ke ipericardial sac yona ke inegazi noma yayinegazi ke elingaphansi noma elincane nje kuno 50 ml walo igazi ngaphandle ke kokulimala inhliziyo yona ke obuningi bayo ke yayise normal.
The heart mass, I weighed it as 400 grams.
Bese kuthi mangikala yona ke inhliziyo ngathola u400 gram.
Paragraph 15, Roman 15, the large blood vessels were intact.
Nokuthi ke ama blood vessels ke la amakhulu ke wona ke ayesahlangene.
And then the next heading is the abdomen, that's the stomach.
Bese ngikhuluma ngaso ke isisu.
16, the peritoneal cavity, that's the cavity in which all the organs are housed in the stomach, was normal.
Ukuthi ke la konke ekuhlala khona ke esuswini nako ke kwaku njengenjwayelo.
Then 17, the stomach and contents. The stomach contains 500 milliliter of partially digested food material in which rice, vegetable matter and fragments of meat can still be identified.
Bese kuthi ke isisu kanye nalokho ke okungaphakathi kusona ke ukuthi ke isisu sasino 500 ml wokudla ke wokudla ke okwakungaphakathi kusona la ekwakwazi ke ukuthi kubonakale khona ke irice ama vegetable kanye futhi ke nokuncane kwenyama ukwazi ukuthi ungakubona.
Then 18, the intestines and mesentery, the bowel and mesentery are pale, again indicating the blood loss.
Bese kuthi ke uma ukhuluma lana ke ngalokho okungaphakathi ke kanye nama mesentery ukuthi ke yona ke ibowel kanye nama mesentery ukuthi ke nawo ke aseshintshe umbala lokho ke kukhuluma ngokuthi ke waluza igazi.
Then Roman 19, liver, gallbladder, biliary passages. The liver is pale, again indicating blood loss.
Bese kutholakala ukuthi nayo ke iliver yakhe ke nayo ukuthi ishintshe umbala naloko khuluma ke ngokuthi ke walahlekelwa igazi.
The gallbladder contains bile, and the bile ducts are patent.
Bese kutholakala futhi ke ukuthi ke yayikhona ke nenyongo awaye nayo.
The liver mass was 1540, which is normal.
Kanye futhi ke imass yayo ke iliver yakhe kwaku 1540 ejwayelekile.
Paragraph 20, the pancreas is pale.
What is the pancreas?
Pancreas is the organ, one of the internal organs next to the liver and the stomach.
Kuthi konke ke lokho okutholakala ngaphakathi ke duze kwayo iliver kanye nesisu ke ukuthi nayo ke kwakushintshe umbala.
The fact that the pancreas was pale, is it indicative of anything?
Again, blood loss.
Nalokho ke kusho noma khuluma ke ngokuthi ke walahlekelwa igazi.
And the pale liver?
The same.
Kanye ke nokuthi liver yakhe ke nayo yayishintsha umbala nalokho kusho ukuthi walahlekelwa igazi.
Paragraph 21, the spleen. The capsule of the spleen is wrinkled. This again is an indication of blood loss.
And which part of that?
The what? The spleen.
Yes.
The spleen, there's a capsule surrounding the spleen, and this wrinkle is like shriveled and wrinkled, indicating blood loss.
Lana ke lokho kubizwa ngokuthi ke ispleen ukuthi wakuno capsule ke yona ke eyatholakala ke ukuthi ayihlezi ngendlela yayo ke nokuthi uma ngayichaza ukuthi yayishwabene.
And the fact that the spleen was wrinkled, is it indicative of anything?
Blood loss.
Nalokho kuchaza futhi ke ukulahleka kwegazi.
The adrenal glands are normal. The kidneys are pale, again indicating blood loss.
Nalapho kutholakala khona ukuthi ima-kidney akhe noma izinso zakhe ke nazo ke zashintshe umbala okuchazayo ukuthi ukulahleka kwegazi.
14, the urinary bladder and urethra contains 100 milliliter of clear urine,
nokuthi ke lana ke kuma urinary lana asebenzisa khona ke uma eya ngasese ke kwatholakala ke urine eclear 100 milliliter.
The pelvic walls and genital organs were normal.
Futhi ke nanga ukuthi nakumzimba wakhe ke ola ngenzansi ke ukuthi watholakala ke ukuthi naye unormal.
And the spine and the spinal cord were intact, and the cord was not examined.
Nokuthi ke la ngasemuva ke emhlane ke kanye nespinal cord ke kwatholakala khona ke ukuthi ke nako ke kuhlangene nokuthi ke ispinal cord ke asizange sihlolwe.
And then I took some specimens for DNA, blood, swabs from the fingernails for DNA, with a seal number and evidence band, and I handed to SFOE Mokoena.
Kukhona ke nobufakazi ke noma kokubizwa ngokuthi ama specimen engakuthatha ke ukuthi kuhambe kuyohlolwa kwakuyigazi ke kanye futhi ke nobufakazi ke noma ama swab athathwa ke lana einzipheni zakhe kuyobhekwa ke iDNA kwase kune serial number kune evidence bag ekhona ke lapho lokho nganikezela ke noma ngangidlulisa kuyena uSFOE Mokoena.
Additional observations: the autopsy was attended by the investigating officer, A.S. Mutwedi from the Provincial Investigating Unit, Warrant Officer T.T. Mshlambu from the Provincial Task Team, Mshalo from the Captain Mangena from Ballistics, and Lieutenant Makati from Ballistics, as well as Warrant Officer Mtini from Ballistics.
Ababekhona ke nkathi ngangenza wona ke lo msebenzi ke ukuthi ngihlinzeke umzimba lowo ngibheke noma ngenze uphenyo lwami kwakuyena Warrant Officer A.S. Mutwedi owase Provincial Investigating Unit, Warrant Officer T.T. Mhlahlo naye ke uwe Provincial Task Team, uCaptain Mangena obuya kuma Ballistics kanye naye ke uLieutenant Makati naye ke owama Ballistics kanye no Warrant Officer Ntini owama Ballistics.
According to the history, the deceased was shot in his home. Following this, he was taken to a hospital where he was certified as dead. No treatment was given in hospital.
Ngokomlando ke noma lokho engakutshelwa ke ukuthi umufi wadutshulwa ke kwakhe noma ke kibo emuva kwalokho wase ehanjiswa ke esiwa esibhedlele la abamchaza khona ke ukuthi eseshonile akazange atholeke ukulashwa khona esibhedlele.
And number 3 is according to the verbal information, it appears that the deceased was shot during an attempted armed robbery.
Ngalokho engakutshelwa ke kwabukeka ke ukuthi umufi ke wadutshulwa ke la ekwakuzanywa khona ke ukuthi kubanjwe inkunzi.
And then there were no special investigations that I needed to consider for my cause of death.
Kwakungekho ke okukhethekile ke noma uphenyo olukhethekile engangizolenza mayela ke nokuthi ngithole imbangela yokushona kwakhe.
Thank you, Doctor. If I can then ask you to come back to page 2, paragraph Roman figure 5, the cause of death.
I gave a cause of death consistent with bullet wound of the chest involving the heart and lung.
Imbangela ke noma ke izathu sokushona kwakhe ke kwaba ukulimala ke noma ke inxeba ke elabangelwa yona ke inhlamvu esifubeni ihlanganisa ke inhliziyo kanye nesiphunga.
Doctor, do you confirm the correctness of your report and stand by it?
I do.
Yebo ke ngakho ke lokhu okubhaliwe ke la nokuthi kuyilona ke iqiniso lokhu engikubhalela kulo mbiko.
Doctor, just general aspects, if you go to page 6 of your report, number 2, say according to the history, the deceased was shot at his home. Following this, he was taken to a hospital where he was certified as dead. Are you able to give an indication of, given the clinical picture that you've just outlined, how long the deceased would have survived after the infliction of the wound?
Well, the heart and the lungs are important organs, and injury, especially this type of injury to those organs, can cause a fatality. Sometimes it's instantaneously. In this case, I do not think so because of the mechanism of death, which I explained as possibly the blood loss. And I think in this case, and he's quite a fit young man, he probably would have survived seconds, minutes, definitely not hours.
Lana ke uma sengishilo ke sengikhulumile ke ngendlela ke noma ke lokho okwaba yimbangela ke noma ke isikhali esasetshenziswa ke uma ngangimbhekile ke kwakubonakala ke kuyinsizwa nje na ke eyondlekile ke efit futhi mhlambe ke wayengasababa ke ama minutes ama seconds kodwa hayi amahora nokuthi futhi ke isiphunga kanye nayo ke inhliziyo ukuthi ama organs abalulekile ke emzimbeni.
And you mentioned during your findings that there was blood loss and the destruction of the heart.
Yes.
Ngishilo ke ukuthi ke kwaku igazi ke walahlekelwa ke igazi kanye futhi ke nokumala kwakho inhliziyo.
It was, sorry, can I just recap? I didn't hear quite well. Blood loss, and there was an injury to the heart and the lung.
Yes.
Ukuthi ke walahlekelwa igazi ke kwakhona ke ukulimala enhliziyweni kanye nasesiphungeni futhi.
Now, Doctor, if I can ask you to turn to page 4 of the sketch there, indicating the wound track. You earlier on, just scroll down, just, yes, the wound track. You earlier commented that the wound is at an acute angle. What would you say the trajectory of the wound is?
It's down, back, and away from the midline.
Ukuhamba kwayo ke inhlavu lokho ukuthi kwakuhla ke kuya ngasemuva ke bese ke kushifta noma kuhamba kusuka kuyona ke i-midline yomzimba.
Now, Doctor, are you able to venture an opinion as to what the position of the deceased was at the time when the wound was inflicted?
My Lord, when we do the autopsies, we usually describe the injuries as if the person is standing upwards.
Uma ke senza yona ke autopsy lena ke sichaza ke ukulimala lokhu ngokuthi ke umuntu lona ke umi ngeinyawo noma umile.
With his hands next to his sides, palms
Izandla zakhe ke zila emaceleni
facing forwards,
nokuthi ke zivuleke zibheke ngaphambili
and the head looking straight ahead.
kanye ke nekhanda ke libheke straight.
They call it the so-called anatomical position.
Bayibiza ngokuthi ke anatomical position.
In reality, we always know this is not so.
Empeleni ke into esube siyazi ke ukuthi ke lokho akubi kanjalo ke.
People, when they are shot or assaulted, tend to move around or bend or do some movements during this.
Abantu ke behlaselwa ke beshaywa noma kwenziwa lokho ke ngesinye isikhathi omunye ke akamanga endaweni eyodwa omunye maybe mhlambe ke ubheke phansi ke noma ugobileke.
In this instance, I can, for instance, think, according to my autopsy findings, that if the weapon is held in a position like this, the deceased could have moved forwards.
Uma ke sengikwenza ke noma ngikwenza ke loluphenyo ke futhi ke nokuthi isibhamu sasikanjena ke ukuthi mhlambe ke umufike wa movela ngaphambili.
Moving forwards and bending down at the waist, slightly bending down at the waist.
Noma ukuthi ke egobela phansi ke.
If the accused was standing right in front of him.
Uma kuukuthi ke umangalelwa ke wayimi phambi kwakhe.
Or he could have tried to push the firearm away from his body.
noma ke mhlambe wayezama ke ukuthi isibhamu lesi ke asisuseke asiphusheke ukuthi sisuke la kuyena emzimbeni,
Pulling it downwards in the downwards, backwards, and a lateral position.
esidonsela esidonsela enzansi.
Now, Doctor, if you can have a look at photo 15 of Exhibit D, photo 15.
15.
Yes, photo 15. Right. Now, the evidence is that there was a struggle between the deceased and other occupants of the house and the attackers there in the kitchen. What would your comment be regarding the post-mortem findings?
Well, basically nothing, unless I take into consideration some of the notes and things that I see on the wooden door, which looks like a tube.
Ukuthi ke umshushisi uyamchazela ke udokotela ukuthi ubufakazi buthi ke kwakukhona ke ukulisana phakathi kwakhe umufi kanye nabanye abantu ke ababekhona ke endlini kanye nalabo ke futhi babebahlasela uthi cha akukho ke engakusho ngaphandle kokuthi nje ngasebenzisa ke ama notes lana kanye futhi ke naloku engikubonayo ke kusona isicaba.
Yes, do you want to elaborate or do you want to stand by that comment?
No, I don't. The deceased could have stood anywhere unless I know where the bullet went. The bullet passed through the person, so if he was shot from the door side, the bullet would have gone the other way. If it was shot standing against the door, it would obviously have gone through the door.
Nalapho ke kufanele ngazi ke ukuthi wayeme kuphi ke nendawo umufi inkathi eshaywe yona ke inhlamvu ngoba ke yayingashaya ke inhlamvu ke ibuyeke uma ukuthi wayencike kusona ke isicaba yayingashaya ke ibe iphumela ngale kusona isicaba.
Now, Doctor, are you able to state as to how long it took for the bullet to perforate the, as you stated in your findings, to perforate the body of the deceased?
And we're talking about seconds, milliseconds perhaps.
Asikhuluma lana ke ngamaninjana nje sikhuluma ke ngama seconds ukuthi yayingangena ke bisiyaphuma ke inhlamvu emzimbeni wakhe umufi.
I'm sure a ballistic officer can give you more detail on the speed of the firearm.
Nesiqiniseko sokuthi lona osebenza ngazo ibhamu lona ama ballistic ke kuyena ke ongakunikeza ke noma ongasho ke mayela naso ke isivini noma ispeed sayo inhlamvu isibhamu.
But I'm specifically referring to the bullet entering and passing through the body.
Kodwa mina ngikhuluma ngongena kwayo ke inhlamvu ibese ke iyadlula emzimbeni.
Now, during that process would the deceased have started bleeding when the bullet entered and left the body as you've just described?
He would have started bleeding immediately. Once it injured the heart and the lung and the small artery, he would have started bleeding immediately.
Nkathi njena ke inhlamvu isishaya ke isilimaza inhliziyo isiphunga ke ukuthi ke ukuphuma ke noma ukopha kwakhe bekuzoqala ngaleso sikhathi leso.
As long as his heart was pumping, he was bleeding out away from the heart into the chest cavity.
Ukuthi nje uma bekuthi ibisi yayisashaya ke inhliziyo yakhe uma iseqala ke nje ukuthi igazi seliyaphuma ke belizophuma ke bese liyo ngena kuyona ke icavity leyo.
So if the mechanism of death was, as I suspect, that there was blood loss, he died of blood loss, The blood would have circulated from the left side of the heart, which was still pumping, down through the body, up onto the right side of the heart, and he would be bleeding from the right side of the heart.
Uma kuukuthi ke walinyazwa ke noma ke imbangela yokushona ke ilena ke mina ke engicabangelayo noma engishoyo ke ukuthi ke wayizothi ke ukuphuma kwalo noma kopha kwakhe ke kuhleke kuyenzansi ku side la ku left luze kuleli side la ku right bese kuthi uma manje ke esopha ke kophela ku side la ku from east side la ku right.
And this would be landing into the chest cavity.
Bese ke lapho ke yasuka ke iyongena kule ndawo ebizwa ngokuthi ke iyona ke i-chest cavity.
Some blood can still leak out through the skin wounds.
Elinye igazi ilise lingaphuma ke ngaso iskin liphumele ngaphandle.
It would not be like spouting like an arterial blood, for instance.
Ngeke kodwa ke indlela eliphuma ngayo ke lifaneke na uma igazi seliphuma ke ngesivinini ke esikhulu ke.
What would be the position? You say the blood will not be spouting out.
Squirting out, for instance.
Ngokuthi liphume nje ngokusheshsha kubona indlela eliphuma ngayo ngokusheshsha.
I'm talking from out to the outside of the body. Yeah.
Ngikhulumela ke ngokuphumela ngaphandle emzimbeni.
And just lastly, Doctor, you mentioned that you have taken a second for the body to, for the bullet to enter and leave the body. When the deceased started bleeding internally, would the bullet still be in the body, or what would be the position?
Milliseconds.
As a court pleases, yes, yes.
Am I correct?
Yeah, milliseconds to seconds, yeah.
Yes. What would be the position regarding the bullet when the deceased started bleeding internally?
Then the bullet must have left the body already.
Uma ke eseqala ukuthi nje open noma liphume ke igazi kusho ukuthi ke ngaleso sikhathi ke inhlamvu bisiphumile ke emzimbeni.
Thank you, my lord. Those are the only aspects we wanted to take up with the witness.
Yes, Ramsapit.
My lord, I see it's almost 20 past 11. If we may take a short adjournment, my lord.
Okay, fine. 15 minutes adjournment.
As the court pleases, my lord. Good afternoon, Dr. Steenekamp. The good doctor, I'm going to ask you clarification questions because I'm a layperson when it comes to medical ballistics, forensic pathology, correct? Now, if we refer to your Roman number 2, which is at the general page 3. And we refer to the blood-stained clothing that you had described in Roman 2, bullet points 1 to 4. Now, there's a photo at the corner of the scene with blood droplets. I'm not sure whether you've seen that photo. That's photo 59 of Exhibit D. With the injuries that you have described, will you expect that type of blood droplets from the body of the victim? Would you expect to find that type of blood droplets rather than...
I can't remember seeing those photographs, but what I can say is, remember he's got 2 external wounds, and they are bleeding like drops falling off. Oops, sorry.
Isithombe ke noma ithombe lezi ongibuza ngazo la kwakunegazi phansi ke noma eduze kwe-couch kanye ne-TV stand angikhumbuli ke ngiyibona lezo ithombe lezo kodwa ke uma umuntu ophake ungalindela ke ama drops yebo.
Yeah, that's I'm looking at the photograph, my lord. That's possible.
Yebo ke uma ngibheka lesa sithombe yebo kungenzeka ke ukuthi
It's like blood dripping.
ukuthi nje uconsa kwegazi.
Now talk to me about the victim being removed from there, which is at the corner, through the sitting room, via the kitchen, outside the door, to the car. Would you expect blood trail like this all the way where he was carried from the house?
It would be on how he was carried. If he was carried on a stretcher, no. If they just like moved the body, physically, and the body was exposed and wound there, the blood would be dripping from that wound.
Lokho kuukuthi ke uma bemkhipha ke endlini bemhambisa ke emotweni ukuthi bamhambisa kanjani ke uma ukuthi babembeke ku stretcher yebo cha lingeze libe khona ke igazi phansi kodwa uma kuukuthi nje babe ubambile nje umzimba wakhe yebo wawuzolindela ukuthi igazi liconse phansi.
In this case, the latter situation that you had just described happened. He was carried physically, not on a stretcher, from the house into the waiting car outside the yard. So would you expect blood droppings and a trail of blood all the way?
Maybe it should be put in its proper context that the head was propped up and that's how he was carried, my lord. That's the evidence.
Yes, Mr. Rappe.
My lord, it's physical carrying of a person, whether somebody was balancing his head off. All I'm concerned about is the wound here and the exit wound, whether they leave a blood trail. The head was not shot at. Now, in bullet point 4 of same Roman figure 2, in brackets, you say that the clothing of the victim was not analyzed for further investigation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yebo ngishilo ukuthi ingubo wayegqokile ke umufi ayizange ithathwe ukuthi ziyophenywa ke.
Now, with respect to how you conduct the post-mortem, the gunshot wound to the chest, would you be able to opine regarding the distance from where the victim was and the shooter was at the time of the shooting?
The firearm was against the victim, But how far the shooter was, arm's length to hold a firearm, or bent obviously, then closer.
Ukuthi ke ibanga ke phakathi kwalo owayedubula nalo owadutshuva ke kodwa ke bengikushilo ke ngaphambilini ukuthi ke isibhamu sasibekwe kuyena ke la emzimbeni ukuthi lo owayedubula wayekude kangakanani ke kuyena ukuthi nje kwakuyibanga maybe lengalo noma ukuthi mhlambe wayegobileke.
Now, in your testimony, you testified about black granular material resembling gunpowder. And the scientific or medical terms thereof, I'll give you two names. The one is soot and the one is stippling. Can you please explain that for the court and for everyone here?
Yes. What I've noticed there is this black granular material, and soot, as you described, is black. The burnt particles, the black granular stippling that you see in a close wound, which I didn't see here, are the burning and unburnt particles entering the skin separately. So,
I'm sorry, doctor. Can you stop it?
Can you repeat that? This is now
Okay.
so the soot that we see is the burnt particles.
Uma ke ummeli ke unamagama awasebenzisele ke linye lawo ke isuthi uthi ke uma ubona isuthi ke ila ekushe khona ke yes.
The stippling that we see, which I didn't see here, is usually a close wound and see around the wound.
Istipling ke sona ke engazange ngisibona ke lana ke usume kuvamise ukuthi ke ilona ekuseduze ke noma ke futhi inxeba eli round.
Is due to the burning and unburnt particles.
Ukusha nalezo ndawo lezo engashile.
Now, with respect to the travel, like in a contact wound, will we then see the soot rather than the stippling itself?
A soot, they're all the gunpowder residue. The soot is just burnt out completely. That's all.
Zonke ke lezo uma zibizwa ke uyona ke lempuphu noma ke iresidue lena ke ye gunpowder kodwa kusho ukuthi ke yeshileke noma engashile ukuthi ubizeke ngamagama ahlukile.
Now, with respect to the clothing worn by the victim, how will they impact your forming an opinion as to the range? Will we see the barrel mark of the muzzle mark on the body itself when the muzzle is pressed against the body, if somebody is wearing a vest and a T-shirt, as it's in this case?
Yes, you could still see that.
Uma kuukuthi ke impahla ke wayigqokile ziyaphenywa ke noma nazo ziyavivinywa ke impela ke uma ukuthi isibhamu sasibekiwe kuyona ke khona ke imark ozoyibona noma ungayibona ke leyo mark leyo.
Now, again, there's something that's called bullet wipe, which is the greasy part of the outside of the bullet, which will reveal itself on the entrance wound normally. Did you see that with respect to the T-shirt worn by the victim in this case?
No, I did not.
Lokhu ke kumele kubizwe ngokuthi i-bullet wipe ke okuyibonakalisayo ke kusona ke i-T-shirt noma la isibhamu esibekwe khona angisibonanga noma ngizange ngisibone ngikuboneke kuyona i-T-shirt yakhe umufi.
And then the contact wounds that you talked about, there are various contact wounds that will be the loose contact, the angled one, the hard one, and the incomplete one. If I understood you correctly, you said this was an angled acute contact wound, correct?
Yes, it was a hard contact. It was right against the skin, but the barrel moved slightly in the direction as I've described.
Bengishilo ke ukuthi lana ke lena inxeba lana ke isibhamu lesike sasibekiwe ke emzimbeni wakhe kodwa ke uma sesingena ke sasisihla ngawo umzimba.
And now, with respect to when you want to do examination, in this case, it was not done for reasons that you said. You, the investigating team, ballistic and investigation, decided that they shouldn't be tested. What was the reason, in fact, for that?
I don't think we could see anything. I can't remember. First of all, I can't remember. That was not significant to them.
Angisasikhumbule ke isizathu noma imbangela ke yokuthi impahla zakhe wayigqokile zingathathwa ke nokuthi ke kwakhona nje kwangabonakala kodwa ngisakhumbula noma futhi kwakungabalekile kubona labo ke abaphenyayo.
Now, evidence led in this case is that there was a scuffle in the kitchen at photo 15 that was shown just before the break, and there were about 2 suspects and 6 adults in that space. Yeah, we're just moving to photo 15 now. In that space, there were, photo 15 is on the screen. Now, evidence is that there was a scuffle in that space among 2 suspects and 6 adult persons that were in the house. Now, I want to touch on this with respect to the PR test or the GSR test. What is the radius for the GSR to attach to people that are near when the firearm is fired in that space?
That, unfortunately, I won't be able to tell you. That's
for
for
the ballistics.
ballistics.
Okay, all right.
Lona ke mbuzo ngibuza wona ukuthi ibanga ke uma kuzotestwa ke impuphu lena esibhamu ke akusona kumbuzo ngawuphendula abama ballistics abangakuphendula lokho.
You also spoke about the searing around or the burn around the entrance wound. Can you describe that for us?
When the firearm, when the firearm is fired and the gunpowder is ignited, there is a flame coming out. So that burns the edges. So you get the searing effect.
Uma ukuthi ke isibhamu siyaqhuma ke ukhona ke lokho ngathi ke umlilo ke ophumayo ke manje lokho kuyashisa ke lana kuloko kubiza ukuthi ke ama edge.
And in general, with contact wounds against the clothing, what sort of a mark will a contact wound have on a T-shirt if the muzzle is pressed against the skin and the T-shirt?
It depends. It could be anything. It could be nothing. It could just be a hole, or you could see, depending on obviously the angle of the firearm and how it was held, that you could see some of the remains of the gunpowder.
Uma ukuthi ke isibhamu sibekiwe ke kuyona i-T-shirt leyo ke kusengenzeka ungaboni lutho kusengenzeka ke ubone nalokho ke depend ukuthi ke isibhamu besibekwe kanjani ke la emzimbeni noma kuyona ke i-T-shirt yomuntu.
Now, I'm not sure whether this is a ballistic question. If it's a ballistic, you let me know. A witness testified in this court that he observed a firearm that was used by one of the suspects, that it had a will. In your experience, in your training as a pathologist, will you know the type of firearm that's got a will?
No, I won't.
Okay.
Ukuthi ke kwakuyisibhamu esasinesondo ke angeke ngikwazi ke lokho.
And you've testified, and it's at page 6 of your report, in the specimens retained. And then it says blood and swabs from the fingerprints were taken for DA analysis, and the serial bag number and the SQE person that you handed the specimen to. Was GSR or PR test done on the hands of the victim himself?
I don't know.
Ukuthi ke lama test kunama test enziwa ke kuwona ke inzipho noma ama nails akhe umufi lokho angikwazi.
Now, I'm touching on the other aspect that was raised by my learned colleague from the state, which is the following. A witness has testified in this court that upon hearing that the victim was shot and they being informed, that is the person who testified plus community members, they went to a nearby park to look for the alleged perpetrators. And they searched the park, and after plus minus 12 minutes, they went back to the scene. And when they entered through this door, just near the hallway here, they found the victim lying down, unattended. Now, my question to you is this. After plus minus 12 minutes of no medical attendance at all on the victim, would he have survived that wound he suffered?
The doctor has just testified that it's not possible that he would have been alive for hours.
Okay, all right.
He says it's seconds.
Seconds or
Yeah,
milliseconds.
please.
Okay, it's fine, my lord. If the court can bear with me, I'm writing out. Now, as well as, just for clarification purposes, that the same persons, when they returned from the park, they tried to sit the victim up and then they saw blood on the back. Is it procedure, or how would that affect the injuries if somebody shot on the chest? Is people try to sit him up or pick him up like that? With respect to
No.
the internal injuries.
In terms of worsening that injuries, are you saying that? It won't do much. It won't do much.
ukuthi ke base befika ke bemphakamisaka noma bemhlalisaka ukuthi ngenza ke ukuthi ke inxeba lelo ke ukuthi ke libe buhlungu kakhulu ke noma limale kakhulu ke angeke kwenze akunamanakalo nje lokho ongakwenza.
Okay. As the court pleases, my lord, that is the questions that I have for the doctor.
Mr. Mlefi?
As it is the court, my lord. Good day, Doc.
Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, Doc. Thank you, Doc. I'm going to try and paint a scenario that was given by the state witnesses who testified, eyewitnesses who testified about how possibly the incident might have had happened in the house. I will do that with a view to try and give you just a bit of a background. Then we come and speak about your possible findings on the fact that the firearm was most probably fired from an angle of depression. Do you understand? Thank you. Now, according to the eyewitnesses, well, there are two versions, but I'll explain them to you. One side of the story is that just a bit of a background. According to the state witnesses, there are two people who got into the house whilst they were seated in the sitting room, one of which had a firearm. The other one did not have a firearm in his possession. Now, the one who had a firearm gave some instruction that he wanted money and cell phones. One of the occupants of the house stood up and accosted the gentleman who had a firearm, pushed him aside, and then he dashed out of the house. That's when then the rest of the occupants of the house also stood up, and a commotion then happened. They accosted the two people, the intruders. We prefer to call them intruders here at court, up to the kitchen area. That is generally the bit of a background. Now, one version from the eyewitnesses who were in the house is that the deceased then was in a tussle or was fighting with the person who had a firearm. That's now one of the versions. And as they were fighting, the person who had a firearm has had his back on the kitchen door, as you're looking at photo number 15. In other words, the firearm person or the person who was in possession of the firearm was leaning on the kitchen door as the deceased was facing him. Do you follow? Now, there was a shot that went off and everybody started to run away. There's basically no indication that somebody said, no, I saw how the shot was fired. It was just a shot that went off as the deceased and the person with the firearm were fighting for the firearm. Now, I know you might know, we are not a ballistic expert, but on the basis of that first scenario, when you look at photo number 15, those are the markings where the bullet struck the door as well. Would you say that accords with the explanation, taking into account that the deceased was on the other side of the door? He was not leaning on the door. It was actually the person who had a firearm who was on the door. Would you say that accords with the factual explanation as presented to this court? And also, the fact that according to your finding, the bullet was fired from an angle of depression.
No, that would not make sense.
Ngendlela ke oyichaza ngayo ngoba ke ummeli umchazele indlela ke echaziwe ofakazi ukuthi ke lo owayephethe isibhamu wayencike esicabheni uma ufike yena ke engaphakathi ke endlini ebheke kuyena kodwa udokotela mayiphendula ke uthi ngalendlela oyichaza ngayo ke angeke ke ayihlangani ke ngalendlela oyichaza ngayo.
Thank you. Now, that was just the first scenario that was given to this court by the state witnesses. Now, the second scenario is one of the witnesses also testified that as the skirmishness was happening in the kitchen, the deceased was in a tussle or was fighting with the person who did not have a firearm, and that fighting was taking place at that door area. Do you follow? As and when the person who did not have a firearm was fighting with the deceased at that door area, the person who had a firearm was behind the deceased. Do you also follow? Now, again, in view of your explanation that the shot, in view of your analysis and your conclusion that a shot could have been fired from an angle of depression, does the second scenario also accord with your finding?
Do I understand you correctly? Is that this scenario implies that the deceased was shot from the back? Do I understand you correctly?
I did not get that, Doc. You're a bit low.
Do I understand you correctly?
Yes.
If the scenario that you have described implies that the deceased was shot from the back, so the entrance wound would have been at his back. Do I understand you correctly?
I'm not implying anything. I'm only trying to give you the facts that were presented to this court. In terms of the second scenario, the person who had a firearm being at the back of the deceased. Now, in terms of your finding, that the entry wound is on the sternum, is on the front chest, and the exit wound is at the back. Now, the witness says the deceased was in a tussle with the person. This is just a repetition. Was in a tussle with the person who did not have the firearm, but the person who had a firearm was at the back of the deceased. Now your findings are saying the entry wound was in the front, the exit wound was in the back, and more so, from your analysis of the wound is that the bullet could have been fired from an angle of depression. Just your opinion. Does that accord with your findings?
No, it does not, my Lord.
Lokhu kokuthi ke umufike wayelwisana nomuntu ke owayengaphethe isibhamu bese kuukuthi lo wayephethe isibhamu wayengasemuva kwakhe ke umufi kwase lokho ke akuhlangani ke naloku mina ke engikutholile uma ngaba sengihlola ke ngibheka wona ke umzimba wakhe umufi akuhlangani ke ukuthi lo wayephethe isibhamu wayengasemuva kwakhe.
Thank you, Doc. I had so many questions, but I realized that most of them relate to ballistic expertise, and you're a pathologist. You dissect bodies when they come there to identify the causes of death, not so. Thank you, Doc. I don't think I've got any further questions to you. Thank you, Doc.
Imibuzo mina miningi ke kodwa iphathelene nama ballistic.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, I do have questions, my lord. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Doctor, thank you, Doctor. Amongst the police officers, Doctor, that attended the autopsy was Warrant Officer Mhlahlo and Captain Mangena. Do you confirm that?
Yes.
Yebo ke kwamanye amaphoyisa noma kumaphoyisa ayekhona ke nkathi ngangenza ke umsebenzi wami kwaku warrant officer Mhlahlo nakanye ke no Captain Mangena.
Doctor, there is evidence by one of these witnesses or police officials that the bullet projectile that was found at the crime scene was not measured. Against that background, at the autopsy, Doctor, were there any measurements that were taken by the police officers of the exit and entrance wounds?
No, the usual practice is that the doctor who is performing the autopsy will take the measurements of the wounds.
Ngokwenjwayelo ke ukuthi udokotela lowo ke okuyena ke wenza ke autopsy leyo uyena ke ozokala ke inxeba lelo.
According to the evidence, Doctor, that has been tendered in this court, the incident occurred at that photo in the kitchen at photo 15 of Exhibit D. There is evidence, Doctor, that the deceased, after he had been shot, he moved from that kitchen and he fell on the sitting room. Maybe the sketch plan is going to assist us. Can we be assisted with the beaming of the sketch plan? There's a photo that I've just highlighted to you, Doctor, photo 15 of Exhibit D. After the deceased had been shot, Doctor, in the chest, standing up straight, what would be his position after the gunshot? Would he still be remaining up straight or he will fall down?
It is certainly, well, you would expect a person to fall down, that's the classic thing, but depending on how strong you are, it's possible that this person could have moved around.
Uma ukuthi ke emuva kokuthi usushayiwe ke inhlamvu noma ke usudutshiliwe ke yebo ke ukulindeleke ukuthi ke umuntu awe kodwa ke nalokho ke ukuthi ke umuntu lona ustrong kangakanani ke usunga move around ke.
Are you able to tell this court, Doctor, for how long would he be in a position to move from that point that is at the door?
How long in
Would he
time?
be in a position to move from the door?
I don't know how long it
In
will
distance?
take him. No, I don't know.
Ukuthi ke usengahamba ke kangakanani ke isikhathi esingakanani noma ibanga kangakanani lokho angikwazi ke.
Can I just say, my Lord, I mean, we're talking about seconds to a few minutes here.
Lana ke sikhuluma nje ngamaninjana ke noma ama-seconds noma ke imizuzu nje embalwa.
There is also evidence, Doctor, that if you look at the sketch plan, it was shot at the door will be the below part of just look at the sketch plan. The door will be, the lower part of the sketch plan will be at the lower part of the sketch plan.
Yes.
Yes. And then there is also evidence that he was able to move from that point and he fell on the sitting room. There are couches there. The red, yes, those are two couches opposite each other. And he fell in between the couch on the right, and the TV stand. Will that be possible?
Yes.
Ukuthi ke wasuka khona lapha yana ke ekitchen waye wakule la kunama couch khona yebo kungenzeka lokho.
You also testified, Doctor, that the deceased bled heavily internally. He bled internally.
Yes,
Yes.
that's correct.
Shilo ke noma ukuthi waphaka kakhulu ke kodwa ophake ophela khona ngaphakathi.
Would he also bleed external, that is from the exit wound?
There would have been dripping of wounds. I mean, this is an open wound, like a normal skin wound. So there would be dribbling of blood. Certainly, it could be there.
Yebo ke nokuconsiza kwegazi ke liconsizela ngaphandle ke nako ke bekungakhona.
Will also be correct, Doctor, that this dripping of blood will be from the kitchen, that is the point at the door to the sitting room, in between the couch and the TV stand. The dripping will be found from the kitchen, that is the movement from where he was to the sitting room.
Yes, if you found them, then you can assume that was the movement after he was shot.
Okay.
Nokuthi ke uma lokho consiza ukutholileka ukusuka ekitchen ukuya khona ke e-sitting room la uma kwakutholakele ke ungasho ukuthi yebo kwakunjalo.
Doctor, when you look at the photo album, Exhibit D, starting from photo 12, 15, 26. You will confirm, Doctor, that there is no dripping of blood. Amongst the few photos that I've highlighted to you.
15, 12, 15,
26.
26. Yeah, I don't see any blood there.
Yebo ke kule ithombe ongikhombisa zona ke 12, 15 no 26 yebo angiboni igazi lapho.
Doctor, there's been this theory by the defense that the scene was contaminated, cleaned, before the arrival of the police. Will that suggest that theory if you don't see the dripping of blood?
If he was walking and if he was dripping blood, then surely, yeah.
Uma kuwukuthi wayehamba uma kuthi ayiconsiza igazi yebo ke impela ke wawuzolindela ke.
I mean, Doctor, there's been this theory by the defense that the scene was contaminated, interfered with before the arrival of the police. So the absence of blood will mean or support that theory that there has been some contamination by some people before the police arrive.
That's it.
You mean blood?
Yes, blood spots.
Because contamination is ambiguous.
The-
Unless I understand the doctor, he says if he was dripping blood, the deceased, just listen to me, Doc, the deceased had a T-shirt on. And if you look at the photos, when he was brought to the hospital, as your observation, his T-shirt was bloodied, backwards and forwards. And according to your analysis, blood also percolated towards his trousers.
That's correct.
Right, that's the background. This
Yeah.
gentleman was not naked.
Yes.
That's it. Can you exclude the possibility of the blood percolating from the wound, you actually testify that there was no squirting or sprouting
Yes.
of the blood.
Yes.
It was not like,
Squirting out.
telescoped. He was bloodied. Most of the blood was contained within the chest cavity. Is that
Yes,
also?
that's so.
Yeah, that's the background, I understand.
Maybe, Doctor, if I can make a U-turn and and ask the following question in a different way. There is a witness here by Ulelani Ngaje. He says when he arrived at the scene, he found the deceased at the passage. The passage will be, sorry, Kaya Ngaje. Sorry, it's Kaya Ngaje, not Bulelani. Sorry, Doctor, I'm just looking for this photo so that I can take you straight away to the photo. I'm sorry, Doctor, it's a pity that that passage is not clearly depicted. Maybe if we can use the sketch plan, the sketch plan that you have just used. Yes, he found him lying at that point, facing upward. With the exit wound, is it also possible to find blood, to find blood there at that spot, if the deceased was lying upward, facing upward, and there is an exit wound at his back?
This is possible.
Uma kuwukuthi wayeleli laphayana ke nanjengoba ke ukhaya Ngache ashilo ke ukuthi wayeleli laphayana futhi ebheke phezulu ke yebo wangalindelaka ukuthi ke futhi inxeba ke leli inhlamvu yaphuma kulona engasemuva wangalindela ukuthola igazi laphayana.
Doctor, would that be dropped of blood, or it will be a pool of blood where you would be lying,
It depends.
facing upwards?
It would be like a smudge area that you would be lying in, as if your clothes are wet and you lie on something.
Lokho ke kuwukuthi ke asithi lana ke impahla zakho noma oyigqokile ke zemanzi ke bese kuthi ke uleli phezulu kotho ke noma khona lento oleli phezulu kwayo.
I also heard you, Doctor, saying that if the deceased was against the door, the kitchen door, the bullets would have gone through, exited, and went through the door. What did you mean by that?
You never said that. Did you say that, Doc? That the bullet went through the door? I can see you're surprised.
If the bullet was through him and it
Yeah.
went out of him,
Yes.
it could have gone through the door.
Yeah, it could have.
Yeah.
Not it went through the door.
Yes, I'm sorry. Why not? It could have.
Uthi ngishilo ke ukuthi uma kuukuthi inhlamvu yamshaya ke yaphuma kuyena ke yasishaya esitabheni ke kwakungenzeka ke ukuthi ingaphuma akathi ukuthi yayingaphuma yaphuma kwakungenzeka ukuthi ingaphuma ngaso isitabha.
Thank my Lord, I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chololo.
Doctor.
Thank you, my lord. Dr. Steenkamp, you testified about the wound track. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. You testified about the wound track, that it was from the front to the back, but towards lower side, towards the back. Am I correct? Did I understand you correct?
Yes, from
Okay.
front to back, and downwards and away from the midline.
Ngishilo
Downwards.
ukuthi sathi ilinqabelela ngaphambili ke liya ngasemuva lehla ke mase lisuka ke kuyona lokhu kubizwa ukuthi iline yawo ke umzimba noma midline.
Okay. Could that have been caused by the fact that the shooter was taller than the deceased?
It's possible, yes.
Lokho kwangabangelwa ke noma kwangenzeka ukuthi lo owayedubula ke wayemude kunomufi.
Okay. In a lay's term, doctor, if I understand the the gunshot wound that you examined, was it a fatal wound or what?
I beg your pardon?
The gunshot wound, was it a fatal wound or what?
Yes, it was a fatal wound.
Lona ke lelo nxeba lelo ke elabangelwa ke noma elokudutshulwa kwakhe kwakuyilona ke nxeba nje le babangela ke ukushona kwakhe ke noma elingabangela nje ukulimala kwakhe.
Okay. Yes, I do understand that, but just clarify this for me. Would it have made a difference had the deceased been transported in a stretcher than being transported in a private car to the hospital?
It was a fatal wound and he would have survived a few seconds to minutes. I don't think so. I think if you are in a situation where you have a critical ill patient, you should try and get him to the hospital. But that's my opinion. I'm not a clinician. I'm a pathologist.
Kuuvo lwami ke ukuthi noma ke wayihanjiswe ngestretcher ke angahanjiswa ngemoto eprivate ukuthi kwangeke kwenze umehluko lokho ke ngoba uma kwisimo la umuntu khona ke ethola ukulimala okukanjena ke ufanele ukuthi umthole esibhedlela noma umfikise esibhedlela.
Okay. From the qualifications that you have testified about in this court that you obtained in 1976, does it include the ballistic evidence?
I've never done ballistics, no.
It's not included in this degree.
I never did a course in ballistics.
Angikaze nje ngafunda ke ngokuphathelene nezibhamu noma ama ballistics.
You further testified about the blackening on the wound track. You remember that, Doc?
That's correct.
Ngishilo ke noma ngifakazile ke ngala kujika khona kube mnyama ke kulona ke inxeba noma kulimala lokho.
Did you take any samples along the blackening? Did you take any samples to the laboratory in order to determine what type of the blackening you saw, whether it was because of the powder or it was because of the cloth or any other thing?
No, I did not.
Angizange ngithathe lutho ke ukuthi ke ithunyelwe ke elab babheke ukuthi yini ke eyabangela ke ukuthi kuze kushintshe ke ubala kube mnyama lapha.
If that test was not done, how do we know what type of the blackening was there on the gunshot wound if it was not taken for examination?
Well, that's the usual that we do. We don't do much others. We usually don't send those blood-stained soot and debris for examination, unless we want to do, we're not sure that it is, for instance, the stippling, for instance, then we would take histology. But I've never heard people taking from a wound the blackening.
Angikaze ngakuzwa ke ngaphambilini la ukuthi la kunenxeba khona ke ukuthi lo ndawo la kushintshe khona kwamnyama ukuthi bayathatha base bekuthumela kuyobhekwa ke ngaphandle nje ukuthi uma ke singenaso isiqiniseko kodwa angikaze ngakuzwa lokho.
But to confirm your observation, that should have assisted to confirm what you observed on the wound.
Not really, unless I was doubtful as to what else it could be, and I don't know what much else it can be.
Akusikona ke ukuthi kwakuzosiza ngaphandleni kokuthi ngangingenaso isiqiniseko noma nganginokungabaza enganginako.
Just one last question, Doctor. I know we have answered this question, but I also want to get it from you. That you said at the time when the deceased was shot, from your observations, it means that he would have been facing inside the house. I'm not sure whether you still remember that picture where the door was shown.
Yeah. Number 15, yeah.
From your observation, then it would mean that the deceased was shot when he was facing inside the house.
Not from my observations.
No, I mean from...
If I consider the fact that that might be a bullet wound, a bullet in the door or something, then that would make sense.
Sorry, you can finish.
But if he was shot from the other side, then there must have been a bullet towards the house.
Uma kuukuthi ke manje sengibona ke lenhlamvu ke noma kunokulimala khona esicabheni ke lokho ke kungasho ukuthi impela wayebheke ngaphakathi endlini kodwa uma kuukuthi wayebheke ngaphakathi kodwa uma kuukuthi wayebheke kusona ke isicabha kwakufanele ukuthi ke ukulimala kungaphakathi endlini.
Okay, and that is from your observation that the exit wound was in front.
No,
So that the entrance wound was in front.
that's correct, yes.
That's correct.
Ukuthi inxeba ke la imbumbulu eyangena khona ke lali ngaphambili.
Okay, thank you, my lord. I've got no further questions.
Thank you. Any re-exam? Mr.
Maybe just one aspect. Doctor, you were asked by counsel for accused number 4 about the possibility of blood dripping from the kitchen into the sitting room. You testify that your findings was that that blood would be squirting from the wound. Now the question is, after how long would
No. The doctor never said that.
yes
Ask him.
yes let me
Never
just
said
rephrase. Yes, after how long would the blood start squirting from the wound?
The blood only squirts if there's an artery involved.
Yes.
So if you cut your artery, like your wrist artery, and the blood squirts out,
Yes.
and you'd see these, the blood people or the ballistic people can probably tell you better about the squirt, that kind of thing. But there was no artery involved here. There was not externally. All this was internally. So blood was squirting, but internally, not
Ukuthi ke
externally.
indlela yokuphuma kwegazi noma ke liphuma ke ngokusheshsha ke lingaconsizi ke ukuthi mhlasimbe uma ushayeke lana ke esandleni la elingaphuma khona ke lenze ukuskweta kodwa lana ke la liphuma kodwa liphumela ngaphakathi hayi ngaphandle.
Any other thing you want to add, doctor?
No, thank you, my lord.
Are you not master? Steenkamp?
I am supposed to be.
I
Like
know.
the surgeons are very particular about
I know.
that. They want to be called Mr.
Yes.
Mr. I'm actually a Mr.
That's correct, yes. We keep saying doctor, doctor, doctor. When I was listening to your curriculum vitae, I realized that we have a master in front of it. Well, having said that, I don't know how you would have felt when you were still alive in the year 15 of July. Is it March, when Julius Caesar was assassinated?
It was March, 15th
Yeah,
of
15th
March.
of March, 44 before Christ, when the first post-mortem was conducted. And the cause of death, despite the fact that he was stabbed 32 times or 25 times, only one stab wound was responsible for the death.
One fatal wound.
Okay, thank you.
Can I be excused?
Yeah, you're excused now. Yes, sir.
As a court pleases my lord, we've agreed with my colleagues that in light of the fact that there's an important aspects of the case that we perhaps lead one witness per day, we then request that we stand down until tomorrow. We'll be calling the ballistic expert tomorrow, my lord.
How many ballistic experts are you going to call?
So far, only one, my lord.
Yeah, it will give me time to read on the subject. This judge, I don't go to court with a blank head. I prepare for the evidence which is supposed to be led.
Yes.
So I appreciate you borrowing me these books. Okay.
As a court please.
Okay.
Inkantolo ukuthi bavumeleneke nabambeli ngokubaluleka-ke noma-ke ubumqoka bobufakazi ukuthi bazobiza nje ufakazi oyedwa so bazobiza-ke oyibhamu noma ama-ballistic kusasa bekuyena-ke yedwa ufakazi namuhla lo obizi udokotela.
Okay, we shall have done until tomorrow.